Good morning, students. I am Dr. Damodari. Welcome to the pharmacology class. Today's topic is skeletal muscle relaxants. Skeletal muscle relaxants are the drugs that reduce the muscle tone or cause paralysis, either by acting peripherally at the neuromuscular junction or centrally in the cerebrospinal axis or directly on the contractile mechanism. Basically, centrally acting skeletal muscle relaxants are used mainly for painful muscle spasm and spastic neurological conditions. And the peripherally acting skeletal muscle relaxants are used in conjunction with the general anesthetics to provide muscle relaxation for surgery and for short minor procedures like endotracheal tube intubation, esophageal tube intubation, like that. And coming to the, before going in detail with the skeletal muscle relaxants, we should know what is the mechanism of action of the normal skeletal muscle contraction. Initiation of the impulse from the nerve terminal will release the acetylcholine from the nerve terminal, and the released acetylcholine, it will activate the nicotinic receptors at the motor nerve end plate. So the receptors, nicotinic receptors are of two types, NM receptors and NN receptors. NM receptors are the nicotinic muscular receptors. These NM type of receptors are present at the motor nerve end plate. So activation of the nicotinic receptors at the motor end plate will lead to opening of the ion channels, that is sodium channels. And because of the entry of the sodium channels from outside to inside the cell, it will lead to depolarization of the end plate and muscle will contract. This is the normal mechanism of the skeletal muscle contraction. And this is the slide showing the normal skeletal muscle motor nerve end plate. And coming to the classification of the skeletal muscle relaxants, skeletal muscle relaxants are broadly divided into drugs acting peripherally and drugs acting centrally. The drugs which act at peripherally are again divided into two types. The drugs that act at neuromuscular junction and drugs which are directly acting on the muscle. And coming to the drugs acting peripherally, the drugs acting at neuromuscular junction are again divided into competitive blockers, that is non-depolarizing agents, depolarizing agents, and others. The drugs which comes under competitive blockers are non-depolarizing agents are D-tubocurarine, pancuronium, alcuronium, atracurium, mevacurium, rocuronium, doxapurium, pipecurium, vecuronium, rapacurium, and galamine. Apart from this, the D-tubocurarine is the naturally occurring skeletal muscle relaxants. All others are the synthetic compounds. And the drugs comes under depolarizing block or succinylcholine. This succinylcholine is also known as, other name for succinylcholine is suxamethonium and decamethonium. The drugs which other group of drugs which acts at neuromuscular junction are botulinum toxin. And the drugs comes under directly on the muscle are dantrolene. And coming to the second group of drugs are drugs that act at centrally. These drugs are benzodiazepines, baclofen, tizanidine, mefenacin, and its congeners. The D-tubocurarine is a natural drug. It is the prototype of drug for drugs acting at motor end plate. So this D stands for dextrorotatory. D-tubercularian is a dextrorotatory quaternary ammonium alkaloid. It is obtained from the plant Chondrodendron tomentosum. This plant is available at Western Amazon region, and the other source for the D-tubercularian is Strychnus species, that is Strychnus lithalis. This is from the Eastern Amazon region of the South America. The crude extract, that is the curare, is a dark brown to black gummy resinoid mass. It is soluble in water. It is a quaternary ammonium compound, so it is soluble in water. Because of its quaternary ammonium nature, it does not cross the blood-brain barrier. And the mechanism of this was studied by Claude Bernard in 1856, in the year 1856, and it was isolated by King in 1935, year 1935. Coming to the mechanism of the D-tubercularian, it is a non-depolarizing agent. It will not allow the, actually acetylcholine will cause the depolarization of the muscle, and the muscle will get contracted. And this D-tubercularian, it blocks the, it inhibits the attachment of the acetylcholine at the neuromuscular junctions. That is, it is a non-depolarizing blocker. It binds to the NM-nicotinic receptors on the motor end plate and blocks the actions of the acetylcholine by competitive blockade. These compounds, this D-tubercularian, which is attached to the motor end plate, to the nicotinic receptors, it slowly dissociates from the receptor, and the transmission is gradually restored. So the actions of the D-tubercularian is reversible. So it slowly dissociates from the receptors. And we can also inhibit the actions of the D-tubercularian with the help of the acetylcholinesterases, that is neostigmine. This D-tubercularian is metabolized by the cholinesterases. So its actions are reversed by increasing the acetylcholine at the neuromuscular junctions by administering anticholinesterases like neostigmine. So this is the slide showing the how acetylcholine acts on the normal muscle contraction. Whenever the acetylcholine comes and binds to the receptor, the depolarization occurs because of the opening of the sodium channels, and the sodium will enter into the muscle and causes depolarization, and muscle will contract. The skeletal muscle relaxant, that is D-tubercularian, it come and attaches to the nicotinic receptors, and it prevents the attachment of the acetylcholine at the receptor site. So there is no depolarization, that is non-depolarizing blocker. Is the D-tubercularian is a non-depolarizing blocker, and it will not allow the acetylcholine to come and attach to the nicotinic receptors present at the motor end plate. So it will lead to the paralysis of the skeletal muscle. And coming to the pharmacological actions of the D-tubercularian, its actions on skeletal muscles. It is on these drugs should be given by parenteral administration. Why? Because these drugs are quaternary ammonium compounds. They are not absorbed through the gut. So they have to be administered parenterally, especially IV injections. On parenteral administration, initially it causes muscular weakness followed by flaccid paralysis. The small muscles of the eye and fingers are affected first, followed by limbs, neck, and trunk. Later, the intercostal muscles and the finally diaphragm gets paralyzed. And the consciousness is not affected throughout the process. These skeletal muscle relaxants, they will not affect the consciousness of the person. The recovery occurs in the reverse order. That is, first diaphragmatic muscles and the intercostal muscles will gets recovered, and then followed by muscles of the limbs and neck and trunk, followed by small muscles of the eyes, fingers, and the recovery is in the reverse way. So the effect lasts for 30 to 60 minutes. The duration of action of this G2-bacteriarin is 30 to 60 minutes. And this G2-bacteriarin, it in higher doses, it can block the autonomic ganglia and adrenal medulla. What happened if the autonomic ganglia are blocked? The adrenergic transmission is inhibited, and it will leads to the hypotension. And this drug, it causes the release of the histamine from the mast cells. So because of this histamine release, it will leads to bronchospasm, hypotension, and increased gastric and tracheobronchial secretions. Coming to the pharmacokinetics of the D2-bacteriarin, this is a quaternary ammonium compound, hence not absorbed orally, is metabolized by cholinesterases and excreted through the kidney. And some of the synthetic compounds, they are excreted through bile, like rocuronium and mevacurium. Depending upon the duration of action, the non-depolarizing agents are divided into long-acting, intermediate-acting, and short-acting. This is the table showing the onset of action, duration of action, and the dose of the drug. The long-acting drugs are D2-bacteriarin, galamine, pancuronium, doxycurium, pipecurium. And the intermediate-acting drugs are the atracurium, vecuronium, rapacurium, and rocuronium. The short-acting drug is the mevacurium. The onset of action of the D2-bacteriarin is 5 minutes, and the duration is 35 to 60 seconds. And the dose is 0.2 to 0.4 milligrams per kg body weight. And the onset of action of the galamine is 5 minutes, within 5 minutes, and the duration is same, 35 to 60 minutes. And regarding the pancuronium, the onset of action is 2 to 4 minutes, and the duration of action is 35 to 80 minutes, and the dose is 0.04 to 0.1 milligrams per kg body weight. And regarding the doxycurium, the onset of action is within 5 minutes, and the duration of action is 90 to 120 seconds, and the dose is 0.03 to 0.08 milligrams per kg body weight. Regarding the pipecurium, the onset of action is 2 to 4 minutes. Duration of action is 80 to 100 minutes, and the dose is 0.05 to 0.08 milligrams per kg body weight. Regarding the atracurium, the onset of action is within 2 to 4 minutes, and the duration of action is 20 to 35 minutes, and the dose is 0.03 to 0.6 milligrams per kg body weight. Regarding the vecuronium, onset of action is 2 to 4 minutes, and the duration of action is 20 to 35 minutes, and the dose is 0.08 to 0.1 milligram per kg body weight. Regarding the rapacurium, the onset of action is within 1 to 2 minutes, and the duration of action is 15 to 30 minutes. And the rocuronium, the onset of action is 1 to 2 minutes, and duration of action is 30 to 60 minutes, and the dose is 0.6 to 0.9 milligrams per kg body weight. Regarding the mevacurium, its onset of action is 2 to 4 minutes, duration of action is 12 to 18 minutes, and the dose is 0.15 to 0.2 milligrams per kg body weight. And coming to the adverse reactions of the drugs, they cause respiratory paralysis and prolonged apnea. So the patient should be given artificial ventilation, and the anticholinesterase like neostigmine or edrophonium is used to reverse the actions of the DTOP-curarin and its analogs, synthetic analogs. And the other adverse reaction is hypotension. Because of the hypotension is because of the ganglion blockade and because of the release of the histamine. Histamine will dilate the blood vessels and leads to hypotension. So hypotension is because of the both effects, ganglion blockade action and histamine release activity. The third adverse effect is flushing and bronchospasm. This flushing and bronchospasm is due to the histamine release, and this is not seen with newer synthetic agents. These are the adverse effects are minimum with the synthetic agents, whereas the adverse effects are more with the natural agent, that is D-tubocurarin. Coming to the treatment of the curare toxicity, neostigmine or edrophonium used to reverse the muscle paralysis, and antihistaminics are used to counteract the effects of the histamine, and an antidote called Sugamadex is used for the overdose of the rocuronium and vecuronium. This Sugamadex, it binds to the drug and it chelates the drug and quickly reverses its effects. The complex is excreted mainly through the urine. It is excreted by the kidney. Also, this Sugamadex, it also chelates the pancuronium to some extent. Mainly, it counteracts the toxicity of the rocuronium and vecuronium. And coming to the individual drugs, that is pancuronium. Pancuronium is a synthetic steroidal compound. It is a skeletal muscle relaxant, acts peripherally. It is 5 times more potent and longer acting than D-tubocurarin. And its activity is rapid. And if we give rapid IV injection, it causes increase in blood pressure and tachycardia due to vagal blockade and noradrenaline release. It is eliminated by renal excretion. Its use is restricted to prolonged surgeries due to its longer duration of action. Its duration of action is 60 to 120 minutes. It is available as ampules. Each ampule consists of 2 ml, and each ml consists of 2 milligrams of the pancuronium. Next is the pipecuronium. It is also a steroidal muscle relaxant, slow onset and longer duration of action. It causes transient hypotension and bradycardia. It is eliminated through the kidney and liver. That is, its elimination is through urine and bile. It is available as ampules, 2 ml of ampules. Each ml consists of 2 milligrams. And next one is the vecuronium. Vecuronium is one of the most commonly used skeletal muscle relaxant. It is a congener of the pancuronium. It is having intermediate duration of action due to its rapid distribution and hepatic metabolism. It is excreted mainly through the bile, and it releases mild histamine and ganglionic actions. So it is available as ampules, 4 milligram ampules and 10 milligram vials. And the next drug is the etracurium. Etracurium is 4 times less potent than pancuronium. It undergoes Hoffman's elimination, that is spontaneous degradation without using the enzymes. In addition to, small quantity is metabolized by cholinesterases, and it causes dose-dependent histamine release. When used longer periods, its metabolites may accumulate in the CNS, and they will cause the CNS toxicity. It is available as 2 ml vials, and each ml consists of 10 milligrams of the drug. Hoffman degradation is important. They will ask you in Viva, what is Hoffman degradation or Hoffman elimination? It is eliminated, it is metabolized spontaneously without using the enzymes. And cis-heterocurium. Cis-heterocurium is the cis form of the heterocurium. It is 4 times more potent than the heterocurium. It undergoes Hoffman elimination only. Without it will not metabolized by the enzymes. It undergoes only Hoffman elimination. So it will not releases the histamine, and it is eliminated. It is available as injections 2 milligrams per ml. And next drug is the mevacurium. Mevacurium is the shortest acting competitive blocker. It is metabolized rapidly by plasma cholinesterases. Prolonged paralysis can occur in pseudocholinesterase deficiency, but this can be reversed by the neostigmine. Pseudocholinesterase, some people, they are deficient of the pseudocholinesterase enzyme. Atypical pseudocholinesterase will found in some patients, some people. So in that, the mevacurium is having longer duration of action. And coming to the rocuronium, it is newer non-depolarizing blocker. It is having rapid onset of action and intermediate duration of action. It can be used as an alternative to succinylcholine for tracheal intubation. It is eliminated mainly in bile. Rocuronium is mainly eliminated through bile. The onset of action is dose dependent. That is, with the dose of 0.6 milligrams per kg, intubation conditions are attained within 90 seconds. But with the dose of 1 milligram per kg body weight, the intubation conditions are attained within 60 seconds. And it is available as 50 milligrams per 5 ml and 100 milligrams per 10 ml vials. That is, each ml consists of 10 milligrams of the drug. And coming to the advantages of the synthetic competitive blockers over D-tubocurarin, the adverse effects of the D-tubocurarin are minimized with the newer agents, that is synthetic agents. Is less histamine release, they do not block the autonomic ganglia, and spontaneous recovery takes place with most of the drug. Some are more potent than D-tubocurarin. The D-tubocurarin, the tubo means in the South American Indians, they used to transport this D-tubocurarin within the bamboo tubes. So they use the bamboo tubes for the transport of the curar. So the name D-tubocurarin. They use this D-tubocurarin as arrow poison. And coming to the second group of drugs, those are depolarizing blockers. Example, succinylcholine. Succinylcholine is a quaternary ammonium compound with the structure resembles two molecules of the acetylcholine joined together. The mechanism of action of the succinylcholine is, it is having the succinylcholine, it stimulates the nicotinic receptors at the motor end plates and depolarizes the skeletal muscle membrane. Continued presence of the drug causes persistent depolarization, resulting flaccid paralysis. This is phase 1 block. So the succinylcholine is metabolized by the pseudocholinesterase. Because of the persistent presence of the succinylcholine at the neuromuscular junctions at the nicotinic receptors, continuous persistent depolarization will lead to flaccid paralysis. So this is the phase 1 blockade. And at higher concentrations, succinylcholine shows dual blockade. Initial depolarizing block followed by non-depolarizing block. This non-depolarization is because of the desensitization of the receptors. Because of the persistent availability of the succinylcholine at the receptors, the receptors will desensitized. So the membrane gets slowly repolarized but cannot be depolarized because of the desensitization of the receptors. This is phase 2 block. The exact mechanism of the phase 2 block is not clearly known. This is these receptors, the nicotinic receptors. This is the succinylcholine molecule. Whenever the succinylcholine attaches to the receptors, first initially it causes the opening of the sodium channels and causes the depolarization, and slowly the muscle will get repolarized, and at higher concentrations, because of the desensitization of the receptor, it will not allow the sodium ions enter into the cell, even though the receptor is, the channel is opened. It is because of the phase 2 blockade. And coming to the pharmacological actions of the succinylcholine on skeletal muscles, the onset of action is very rapid, that is within 1 minute. The succinylcholine initially transient muscular fasciculations and twitchings because of the depolarization, mostly in the chest and abdominal regions, followed by skeletal muscle paralysis. It is a short-acting muscle relaxant, and the effect lasts for 5 to 10 minutes. So it has to be given continuously as an infusion if it has to be used for longer effect. Because of its shorter duration of action, if we want to extend its actions, we have to give continuous infusion. And coming to the second pharmacological action is it causes hyperkalemia. This hyperkalemia is because of the prolonged depolarization. What happened? The shift of the intracellular potassium to the extracellular space will occur. It will lead to hyperkalemia. And coming to its actions on cardiovascular system, it stimulates the vagal nuclei and causes initial hypotension. Vagal nucleus is it acts through the M2 receptors, and it causes the bradycardia and hypotension, followed by stimulation of the sympathetic ganglia, leads to hypertension and tachycardia. And at higher doses, it may cause cardiac arrhythmias. And the miscellaneous actions are, it can also cause histamine release if injected rapidly. If it is injected slowly, it won't cause the histamine release. If it is injected rapidly, it can cause histamine release and causes the hypotension. And the dose of the succinylcholine is, it is available as succinyl chloride injection 50 milligrams per ml, and the dose is initially 1 milligram per kg body weight. And if we have to prolong its actions, we have to give slow IV by 0.3 milligrams per kg body weight. Coming to the adverse effects of the succinylcholine. Succinylcholine is metabolized by the pseudocholinesterase. So in some people, because of the atypical pseudocholinesterase enzyme, giving succinylcholine will cause the succinylcholine apnea. Succinylcholine is not metabolized in those patients who are having atypical cholinesterase. It is a hereditary defect. In such patients, because of its prolonged availability, it causes the prolonged apnea and paralysis, which may last for several hours. So the treatment for the prolonged apnea is, we have to give fresh blood transfusion and artificial ventilation, because the fresh blood transfusion, pseudocholinesterase enzyme is present within the plasma. So we have to give the fresh blood transfusions in patients who are having atypical pseudocholinesterase enzyme to treat the succinylcholine apnea. And the other adverse effect of the succinylcholine is post-operative muscle pain. It may be due to the damage to the muscle fibers that occur during the initial fasciculations. Because of the muscle damage, it will lead to post-operative muscle pain. And this succinylcholine, it causes the hyperkalemia. It is due to the sudden release of the potassium from intracellular sites to extracellular sites due to the fasciculations. It may result in cardiac arrest in patients with burns, nerve injuries, and neuromuscular diseases. In these patients, there will be increased potassium levels, that is hyperkalemia will occur with burns, nerve injuries, and neuromuscular diseases. And if we use succinylcholine in those patients, succinylcholine it causes the hyperkalemia, so it will lead to the cardiac arrest in patients with burns, nerve injuries, and neuromuscular diseases. And it causes cardiac arrhythmias. These cardiac arrhythmias is because it stimulates the nicotinic receptors in the ganglia and cardiac muscarinic receptors. So what happens because of the stimulation of the ganglia, it causes tachycardia, and because of the stimulation of the muscarinic receptors, it causes bradycardia. So it will lead to cardiac arrhythmias. And this drug, it causes malignant hyperthermia. Malignant hyperthermia is a adverse effect of succinylcholine. What happened? It is a genetically determined condition. It is rare genetically determined condition. There will be sudden release of the calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and it will lead to the increased body temperature and severe muscle spasms. So, and it will lead to metabolic acidosis and tachycardia. So the treatment of the malignant hyperthermia is with IV dantrolene. Dantrolene is a skeletal muscle relaxant that is directly acts on the muscle. So it is used in the dose of 1 milligram per kg body weight to inhibit the release of the calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and oxygen inhalation. And we have to treat the acidosis by giving sodium bicarbonate, and immediate cooling of the body by tepid sponging. And succinylcholine, when it is used along with the general anesthetics like halothane, isoflurane, and sevoflurane, these drugs, they also trigger the process and cause the malignant hyperthermia. So succinylcholine and halothane, isoflurane, and sevoflurane should not be combined with the succinylcholine. And the other adverse effects are there will be increased intraocular and intragastric pressure due to fasciculations, and it will lead to regurgitation and aspiration of the gastric contents into the lungs, and aspiration pneumonia will occur. These are the adverse effects of the succinylcholine. And coming to the uses of the peripherally acting skeletal muscle relaxants are: number one, they are used as adjuvant to the anesthesia, general anesthetics. Adjuvant to the general anesthetics to get adequate muscle relaxation, which is essential for the surgical procedures. So short-acting skeletal muscle relaxants like succinylcholine are used during endotracheal intubation. And these skeletal muscle, peripherally acting skeletal muscle relaxants, they can be used alone in minor procedures like laryngoscopy, bronchoscopy, esophagoscopy, tracheal intubation, and orthopedic procedures like reduction of fractures and dislocations. They are used as adjuvant with general anesthetics, and they can be used alone for minor procedures. And coming to the third use is they are used in electroconvulsive therapy to protect the patients from convulsions and trauma during electroconvulsive therapy. And this succinylcholine is used in spastic disorders to overcome the spasm of the tetanus and ethitosis. And they are used in treatment of status epilepticus, When convulsions are not controlled by anticonvulsant drugs, these skeletal muscle relaxants are used to control muscle component of the convulsions, but they do not cross the blood-brain barrier. And they are also used in patients on ventilators. They are used in patients on ventilators to reduce the resistance of the chest wall and enhance thoracic compliance, to facilitate artificial ventilation in intensive care units. Coming to the next drug, that is skeletal muscle, peripherally acting skeletal muscle relaxant, botulinum toxin type A. It is produced by Clostridium botulinum. It binds reversibly to presynaptic cholinergic sites and inhibits the release of the acetylcholine from motor nerve terminals. So it is like a competitive inhibitor. It binds irreversible. Competitive inhibitors, if we increase the acetylcholine concentration, they will dissociate from the receptor. Whereas botulinum toxin, it will not dissociate from the receptor. It irreversibly binds to the receptor and it inhibits the release of the acetylcholine from the motor nerve terminals. Local injection of the botulinum toxin will causes weakens the overactive muscle and decreases the hypersecretion of glands innervated by the cholinergic neurons. And the uses of the botulinum toxin are to treat spastic conditions such as spasmodic torticollis, hemifacial spasm, strabismus, blepharospasm, dystonias, lower esophageal spasm, and painful anal fissures. And it is also used to treat the wrinkles on the face and neck. And because of its anticholinergic properties, it is used in the treatment of palmar hyperhidrosis. Its actions last for 3 to 4 months. And the adverse effects of the botulinum toxin are ptosis, diplopia, dry eyes, minor bruises, and lid swelling. Reversible muscle atrophy occur after repeated administration. If we give repeated administrations of the botulinum toxin, it causes reversible muscle atrophy. And coming to the drug that is directly acting on the muscle. Directly acting muscle relaxants are, the example for this is the dantrolene. It is a phenytoin analog and it acts directly on the skeletal muscles. The mechanism of action of the dantrolene is it binds to the ryanodine receptors. The ryanodine receptors present on the sarcoplasmic reticulum. It binds with the ryanodine receptors and blocks the opening of the channel. It inhibits the muscle contraction by preventing the calcium release from the sarcoplasmic reticulum through the ryanodine receptor channels. The adverse effects of the dantrolene is drowsiness, giddiness, fatigue, diarrhea, muscle weakness, rarely hepatotoxicity. So we have to test the liver function tests when this dantrolene is used for prolonged periods. And the use of the dantrolene are, it is used in the spastic disorders like hemiplegia, paraplegia, multiple sclerosis, and spinal cord injury. And it is the drug of choice in malignant hyperthermia. It is useful in malignant neuroleptic syndrome. Coming to the centrally acting muscle relaxants, these are the drugs that act on the higher centers and cause muscle relaxation without loss of consciousness. They have sedative properties, and the drugs are GABA A agonists. Those are benzodiazepines, example diazepam, and GABA B agonist is the baclofen, and central alpha 2 agonist is the tizanidine, and mefenacin and its congeners. Its congener mefenacin, because of its adverse effects, mefenicine is not used. Its congeners like carisoprodol, chlorzoxazone, chlormethazone, methocarbamol. These are the mefenicine congeners used for the central muscle relaxation. And the other drugs are thiocolchicoside, riluzole, gabapentin, progabide. So most of these drugs are used in the treatment of muscle spasms and spasticity. In spasticity, what happened? The basal muscle tone itself is elevated with flexor muscle spasm. Coming to the diazepam, it belongs to the benzodiazepine group. It binds through the GABA A receptors. GABA is the neurotransmitter. It is inhibitory neurotransmitter in the CNS. This diazepam, it binds with the GABA A receptors and depresses the polysynaptic reflexes and reduces the muscle spasm. It enhances the affinity of the GABA for the receptor. And baclofen, it is an analog of GABA. It acts as a GABA B agonist. It depresses the both monosynaptic and polysynaptic reflexes in the spinal cord. So this baclofen, it also inhibits the release of the substance P. Substance P is responsible for the pain. The substance P is released by the inflammatory cells. So the baclofen, it inhibits the release of the substance P and contribute to the pain relief. It releases the painful spasms, including flexor and extensor spasms. And it also improves the bladder and bowel functions in patients with spinal lesions. What happened? The bladder and bowel functions are lost in spinal lesions. So baclofen, it improves the bladder and bowel functions in patients with spinal lesions. And it should be withdrawn gradually after prolonged use. If we abruptly withdraw it, it causes the withdrawal symptoms like anxiety, palpitation, and hallucinations. The side effects of the baclofen are drowsiness, weakness, and ataxia. The dose of the baclofen is 10 to 50 milligrams BID. It is available as 10 milligrams and 25 milligrams tablets. The other uses of the baclofen are, it is used to treat the severe low back pain and alcohol de-addiction. And coming to the other drug, tizanidine. Tizanidine is a congener of clonidine. Clonidine is the central alpha-2 agonist. So what happens if we stimulate the alpha-2 receptors, the release of the acetylcholine from the postsynaptic nerve terminals is inhibited. So it increases the presynaptic inhibition of motor neurons and reduces the muscle spasm. It is used in the treatment of spasticity due to stroke, multiple sclerosis, and amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. The adverse effects of the tizanidine are drowsiness, weakness, hypotension, and dry mouth. So the dose is available as 2 milligrams and 4 milligram tablets. The dose is 2 milligrams tablets TID. And it is also available as in combination with ibuprofen. And coming to the mefenicine congeners, its congeners like carisoprodol, methocarbamol, chlormazanone, and chlorzoxazone are used in acute small muscle spasms caused by local trauma. So all of these drugs cause the sedation. Carisoprodol is apart from its muscle relaxant activity, it is also has weak analgesic, antipyretic, and anticholinergic properties. It is available as 350 milligrams tablets, and the dose is 350 milligrams TID. Coming to the drug methocarbamol, It can be given orally and parenterally. It is available as tablets and injections, 500 milligram tablets and 100 ml injection. The dose is 500 milligrams tablets TID, and the injection, it can be given IM or IV. The dose is 100 milligrams per ml. And regarding the chlormazone, it has apart from its muscle relaxant property, it has anti-anxiety effects. It is available as 100 milligrams tablets. The dose is 100 to 200 milligrams TID. Chlorzoxazone, it is better tolerated and longer acting, and its dose is 300 to 600 milligrams. Coming to the riluzole. Riluzole has both pre and post synaptic effects. It inhibits glutamate release. Glutamate is the excitatory neurotransmitter in the CNS. So this riluzole, it inhibits the glutamate release in the CNS and causes the muscle relaxation. It is well tolerated with minor adverse effects like nausea and diarrhea, and it is used to reduce the spasticity in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. And the next drug is the thiocolchicoside. It is related to the colchicine. Sorry, it is the spelling mistake, not colchicine. Colchicine is the anti-rheumatoid drug. It acts as a GABA mimetic. And this thiocolchicoside, it is used in combination with the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs for painful muscle spasms. And coming to the uses of the centrally acting muscle relaxants are, these centrally acting muscle relaxants are used for musculoskeletal disorders like muscle strains, muscle spasms, myalgia, herniated disc syndromes, low backache, dislocations, arthritis, fibrositis, and bursitis. These are used along with analgesics in these conditions. So these skeletal muscle relaxants has to be used along with the analgesics. And the second use is in spastic neurological disorders like cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis, poliomyelitis, and hemiplegia and quadriplegia. So preferably diazepam or baclofen is used in these spastic neurological disorders. And these centrally acting skeletal muscle relaxants, they are used to treat the tetanus. Especially diazepam is used. The route of administration is intravenous, and they are used in electroconvulsive therapy, especially diazepam, along with peripherally acting muscle relaxants like pancuronium, rocuronium. And these centrally acting drugs are also used for orthopedic procedures like fracture reduction, especially diazepam is used. And coming to the drug interactions with skeletal muscle relaxants, general anesthetics augments the actions of the skeletal muscle relaxants. The anticholinergics like neostigmine reverses the actions of the competitive blockers like pancuronium, rocuronium, and mivacurium. And aminoglycoside is an antibacterial drug, and aminoglycosides and calcium channel blockers, they will potentiate the actions of the skeletal muscle relaxants. And the succinylcholine, if it is used along with general anesthetics like halothane, isoflurane, and sevoflurane, it triggers the occurrence of the malignant hyperthermia. And coming to the contraindications of the skeletal muscle relaxants, it is contraindicated in myasthenia gravis, severe hepatic and renal dysfunctions. Why? Because these skeletal muscle relaxants, they are metabolized by hepatic enzymes, and they are excreted through bile and renal excretion. So they are contraindicated in severe hepatic and renal dysfunctions. And they are contraindicated in patients who are allergic to the specific skeletal muscle relaxants, and they have to be avoided in alcoholics. And coming to the comparative effects of the centrally acting skeletal muscle relaxants and peripherally acting skeletal muscle relaxants. The centrally acting muscle relaxants, they decrease muscle tone without reducing voluntary power, whereas peripherally acting skeletal muscles, they cause muscle paralysis and loss of voluntary muscles. Whereas centrally acting, there will not be any loss of voluntary muscle. The voluntary muscle power is reduced. And the second feature is they selectively inhibit postsynaptic reflexes in CNS, whereas peripherally acting muscle relaxants, they block the neuromuscular transmission. The centrally acting drugs, they can cause CNS depression, whereas peripherally acting drugs, there will not be any CNS depression. Why? Because they will not cross the blood-brain barrier. And the fourth one is the centrally acting muscle relaxants. There can be administered both orally and parenterally, whereas peripherally acting drugs, they has to be administered only parenterally, especially IV intravenous infusion. And these centrally acting muscle relaxants, they are used in chronic spastic conditions, acute muscle spasms and tetanus, whereas peripherally acting muscle relaxants, they are used for the short-term surgical procedures. With this, I have completed the topic skeletal muscle relaxants. Go through the topic, and at the end of the session, you should be able to tell the definition of the skeletal muscle relaxants and what are the types and doses of the skeletal muscle relaxants, what is the mechanism of action of the skeletal muscle relaxants, and what are the uses, therapeutic uses of the skeletal muscle relaxant. You should be able to tell all this after going through the session. Thank you. Thank you for listening.